So the most confusing part, if you are, let's say, somewhere between the beginner and the intermediate user in Google Tag Manager, is that when you're dealing with Google with the data layer, there are actually two data layers, not one that you are thinking of, but actually two. And I believe that this is quite confusing.
Hey there, Measure Geeks, Julian here, back with another video. Today we have Julius from AnalyticsMania on the channel. Since 2016, Julius has been sharing his knowledge and his experiments and his learnings related to web analytics, mainly Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. If you haven't already checked out his blog, it is a must-read. Now, I talked to Julius for our upcoming event, MeasureSummit, where he conducts a session about the GTM DataLayer. Today we're gonna hear a little part out of his session where he specifically talks about the fact that there are actually two data layers. Can you believe it? You can catch the whole session and many others at MeasureSummit 2020. So just head over to MeasureSummit.com and sign up for your free ticket today. All right, we got lots to cover. So let's dive into the MeasureSummit session with Julius from AnalyticsMania.
So the most confusing part, if you are, let's say, somewhere between the beginner and the intermediate user in Google Tag Manager, is that when you're dealing with Google with the data layer, there are actually two data layers, not one that you are thinking of, but actually two. And I believe that this is quite confusing. So brace yourself, and if this still looks confusing, don't worry. I have been there, and many other people have also been there, but let's take a look. So when you are dealing with the data layer in the preview and debug mode, by the way, the preview and debug mode on the left side, it displays all the data layer pushes that were made on a page. So every item is the data layer push. So this data layer push is, so this data layer is what is happening in Google Tag Manager. Now, some of you might also know that you can check the data layer in the browser console. So if you go to the developer tools of, let's say, Chrome browser and enter data layer in the console, you will also see some items. Now, visually, they look very different, but like it looks like from the content-wise perspective, they look kind of the same, because we have right here, we have 6 data layer pushes. So this is the first data layer push. This is the 6th one. And in this case, we see also 6 items. This one starts with 0, and then on the 5th, the very last data layer push was GTM DataLayer, which is also known as window loaded. So it might look that they are the same thing. They are the same things, but they are actually different things. Now, let me quickly explain that. When you do a data layer push, or when a developer does a data layer push, that data layer push adds a new information, a new data into the data layer. And when I talk about data layer, I mean this data layer, because this data layer is on your website. This is what is happening on your site. This is your websites or web applications data layer. Now, this is the data layer of Google Tag Manager. And what happens is that when a data layer push occurs and it pushes data to the website's data layer that you can access with, let's say, with the console of your browser, it then updates Google Tag Manager's internal data model. So in other words, when data layer push occurs, the data is pushed right here, and then based on that data layer push, the information is updated in Google Tag Manager's internal data model. Now, while usually they look the same, there might be some situations when the content of your website's data layer and your Google Tag Manager's data layer is different. And one of the things that you should keep in mind is that, and actually what is confusing, is that data layer in Google Tag Manager, I mean the data model, is quite often called data layer as well. So you have kind of like 2 data layers, even though there is 1 data layer on your website, and it updates the internal data model of Google Tag Manager. And then later, when you configure your GTM configuration, then that data is sent somewhere, let's say to Google Analytics. So when you are using data layer variables, data layer, let's say custom event triggers, they are reading data from the internal data model in Google Tag Manager, not in the data layer. So they access the data not here, but in the preview and debug mode right here. So to sum up, this is the data layer of your website. And in this case, we have like 8 data layer pushes. So each data layer push is an object. If we clicked on this, that data layer push would be expanded, and we could see what kind of content was pushed. And also at the end, we see something weird, something mysterious, which is called push. And this is a function. And the data model is right here. You can see the most recent data model values in the data layer tab of Google Tag Manager. And this is actually what makes it confusing, because it says data layer, even though in reality, technically speaking, this should be the data model. But I understand the design and the idea behind this design, because it would be even more confusing for beginners to explain that, hey, this is kind of like a data layer push, but you're working with a data model. And another difference, talking about differences, is that the data layer on your website that you can access with the console is an array. So you can access, let's say, the third data layer push, and you can get some data from that data layer push. You can access the eighth data layer push. Now, when we're talking about data model, you can access with data layer variables only the most recent value of that particular key. So in this case, if the value of the page post type on window loaded was a bit different, and then on gtm.click it was post, you with data layer variable can access only the recent value of that page post type key right here. And this is all possible because of this push method right here. When data layer is created on a website, this is not some simple regular data layer. It's actually a special array that contains a modified push method. Because if you have at least some knowledge in JavaScript, you know that arrays have various methods that you can work with. So push, pop, slice, unshift, and so on. And they can do different things with arrays. Now, push method in the data layer of Google Tag Manager is a bit modified. It not only adds an element to the array, but it also then takes that information and transfers, let's say, the copy of that information to Google Tag Manager's internal data model. And that is why this is very important. If this push method does not exist, the data layer, even though you can see the information right here, it will not update your data model in your Google Tag Manager. And I will quickly show you actually soon why does it happen. Hey, this is Julius from AnalyticsMania, and I wanted to invite you to the MeasureSummit, where I will be talking about the data layer, and I will give you some tips and gotchas that you need to know.
Alright, so there you have it. This is a sneak peek from the session with Julius from AnalyticsMania. He went on to other interesting tips about the data layer, which you should definitely learn about. If you're interested to see the whole session, you can sign up to MeasureSummit at MeasureSummit.com and get your free ticket for the event. And we actually have more sessions, from Simo Ahava to Krista Seiden to Brian Clifton, and many, many others. So don't miss out. I hope to see you at MeasureSummit 2020. And as always, my name is Julian. Till next time.